My name is Alice Koech. I'm a minister in Julesburg, Colorado, and originally from Kenya. I came to the United States in 1998 to go to school at Asbury Seminary and also University of Kentucky. So I'm privileged to be part of the Northern Colorado District and Rocky Mountain Conference, as well as I am also serving the Nebraska Conference. I have had experience with malaria, getting malaria several times when I was younger and when I lived in Kenya. I remember one particular time that I had malaria and I had to be hospitalized for about 5 days. And initially I didn't know what was the situation. I had fever and headache and joints were painful joints and all that, and throwing up and having no appetite, all the symptoms of malaria. But I went to the hospital. They had to take my blood, to draw my blood, and I guess I was dehydrated, so I had to get IV fluids and medication. And at that time, in Kenya, I think that was in 96 or 97. At that time in Kenya, a patient had to buy their own needles and syringe and medicine. So it was a hard time for a lot of people if you had malaria, because some people would just assume that maybe it is flu, or mistake it for flu and wait for some days to see how it will go if they get healed or whatever it is. And some people could just not afford. So I was blessed to be able to go to the hospital and get the medical help I needed. And then when my son was 9 months old, he had malaria. And in the town where I lived, we didn't have a pediatrician. And so I took him to different doctors who couldn't tell me what really was going on, but I knew that my son was very ill, and I was afraid that he could die. Eventually, I got this one doctor that treated him for malaria, and he got well. Yes, it was a very frightening time for me, because especially when my son was sick, I was by myself. My husband had come to the United States, and I was with the baby by myself, and I didn't know what to do. That was my first child. So it was really frightening. Yes. Yeah. The symptoms of malaria are similar to the symptoms of the flu, and to some extent, from a layman's point of view, the symptoms would be similar to those of typhoid and maybe other sicknesses. So generally speaking, in the villages where I grew up, people assume that everything is the same sickness. Even people who don't have malaria, for example, will assume that it's malaria, or those who don't have who have malaria would think it's probably the flu or typhoid. And sometimes if they don't have proper diagnosis, they end up, a lot of the people in the villages have gotten used to treating themselves with maybe herbal medicine or just taking over-the-counter medication. And so they do treat themselves, and that makes it worse, because if you delay the actual real treatment of malaria, you're making it get even worse, get out of hand. And that's what happens. And I think it's even harder when it involves children and babies who cannot really say what is going on with them. Like when my son was a baby and he was sick with malaria, I did not know what was wrong. He had fever, was throwing up. His body was very weak, and I didn't know what was wrong. And so really proper diagnosis is important. Yeah. I'm really grateful that the United Methodist Church is taking Imagine No Malaria as a priority in global health, because the United Methodist Church has more opportunity to reach a lot of places that don't have other big organizations reach them with education, with prevention, with treatment, with nets, and all that comes with Imagine No Malaria. So I think that it's really a blessing that the United Methodist is doing this and partnering with the church in Africa and even with communities in Africa to eradicate malaria. A lot of what happens in villages in Africa is that big organizations don't get there. And that's sad, but that's reality. The big organizations do not get to the villages, and the government, most people in the villages don't even get the things that the government gives for free because of the priorities of whatever leadership they have. And so having a church like the United Methodist Church, which has a lot of churches in Africa, take this as a priority is a blessing. It is a blessing also for me, being a minister here in the United States, to speak to the cause of Imagine No Malaria because of my experience, not only personal experience with malaria, but experience with family and friends suffering from malaria, and knowing that for the most part they don't get the help that they need. They don't get access to those kinds of things unless a church takes that as a priority.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's really nice to hear your story.
Thank you for having me, and I wish you the best in the work that you're doing.